Hello, podcast listeners. Thanks for joining us on another episode of JJ Meets World. Our guest today is Mr. Dan Cash. We talk with Dan about a lot of things like radio, marketing, Michigan. You're going to really enjoy how he worked his way up the corporate ladder and tells his story of working at Midwest Radio. We're also going to touch on some other really great things like King Ralph, one of the most underrated movies of all time, and why you can't give a one-star review anywhere online. All this and more on today's episode of JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprain. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
So I go on Amazon all the time. Big fan of online shopping. Not such a big fan of Yelp, but I still go to Yelp. If I'm in a town and I need to find, a restaurant, something like that, occasionally I'll look it up and just see what we've got going on. And I notice something more often than anything else when it comes to online reviews, which is the bad reviews that start with, and if I could have given it 0 stars, I would have. I started to really think about that. 0 stars. So if you buy a product and you're going to review it, let's say you bought toilet paper, okay? You bought the first ever JJ Meets World branded toilet paper, and you didn't care for it. It's quilted, leaves little stickies all over the place. Not only that, but it's
tears easily.
Yep, it's black licorice scented, and you don't care for that in your bathroom. So you decide you're going to go online and you're going to warn other people about this because it did not meet your expectations or you just didn't enjoy it. And you're mad because the site you bought it on will not allow you to give it 0 stars. You have to give it a minimum 1 star up to 5. And you're so angry that that's how you start your review, with not anger about the product, anger at the website rating the product. So you're just getting angrier and angrier while this process is going on. But here's the thing. While I can see your point of going for a 0 star rating, I don't think that that's a good way to rate something. I think 1 star to me says, I bothered to purchase this product and use it. So I had an experience. That 1 star is just saying I had an experience with this product.
Yeah.
A 0 star rating means you have no basis for the rating whatsoever. You're just going online and you're writing about it because your ex-girlfriend started an Etsy account and you're really pissed off that she took your idea for NASCAR scented candles. And you want to give it 0 stars, even though you've never purchased, Dale Earnhardt's tires or whatever the flavor scented. I guess it's not the flavor, it's a scent of candle it is. So why are people so angry that they can't leave a 0 star review? Also, I'm also going to throw this one out there, folks. It's really easy to be passionate about a review when you're angry about something. But think about the last time you had great service or you got a great product that met or exceeded your expectations. Did you go online and review that? Probably not.
This might be a failing of the star system. Just intrinsically, because when you think of like giving someone a star, I think that sort of translates to first grade and you did really well on this project and teacher gave you a gold star and you get to go home and you get to show that, right? So if you're awarding someone 1 star, you're still giving them something, right? And people are trying to communicate, no, I don't want to give them any accolade. I want this to be completely negative. And I wonder if it was merely a rating from 1 to 5 instead of stars. It was like, okay, 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. How was it? And they'd go, oh, 1 because it was the worst, right? You've set my expectation at that 1 is the worst.
But isn't that the exact reverse of what we've come to expect? And not just in the United States, but across the world, as number 1? Being 1 is a good thing to most people. Like when you're in a race, you want to come in first. You want to be number 1. So by being number one in some things being good, but being number one in other things being bad, we've really set a difficult. No wonder people have trouble
learning English.
Yeah. Or
I think the number way if you want,
aliens that are going to come to our planet are going to be like, whoa, guys, I don't understand. So do you want to be in 5th place or 1st place?
But even in those contests where number one is what you are trying to achieve, you're beating a much larger crowd of 5, right? More than like, let's just say it's 100 people, and they're only going to give medals to 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place.
Wait a minute, hold on.
So,
do you watch any of the Olympics?
What I'm saying is,
because like when you're like running like a hurdle race, you're not running against 100 people.
Listen, my nephew just competed in a baseball jamboree. He got 4th place, and they only give medals to 1 through 3rd.
Oh.
So he did really well because it was like 80 kids, but he still didn't do well enough. So there's still like a weird numbering system going on up there.
Well, why don't you explain to your nephew that if he were a product on Amazon,
he's a kid, he's not that smart.
With the place that he got, people would just do the one-click ordering
because kids
they'd go like, "Oh, it's got a 4-star, easy, I'll go for this."
He's an age where he's still objectively unintelligent, merely because he's a kid. Just because he's a kid, right?
Well, okay, you can't say just because he's a kid. Maybe he is unintelligent.
No. All kids his age are this dumb. All of them.
Right, and some of them grow out of it and some don't.
Yeah, he'll grow out of it because he's a good kid and he's putting things together. But like his sarcasm doesn't work very well on him right now. He takes you right at your word. One of my favorite things to do to kids is to say something that is incorrect so they have the opportunity to correct you. Kids talk in 2 languages: questions and telling you that you got that wrong and that I know the correct answer to it. And so there was this other kid there, and I was mispronouncing the kid's name so that my nephew would correct me. And he got upset really quickly because I wasn't getting the name right. So I had to back off a little bit.
Something that I like to do with little kids is when I'm interacting with them, I ask them about what they're learning in school right now. And recently I asked a 3rd grader that, and she responded with, "We're learning about the solar system." And I said, "Oh, so like, what are the planets?" And she named all the planets, and like, that's interesting. And she goes, "And this is 4 moons, and this is 9 moons, and this is 150."
Oh, wow.
And so they're naming all, and then she had like the names of certain moons, that were out there. And I thought, oh no, I am instantly in over my head. And I hope that she continues to rattle off information, and I go, and she doesn't turn around and say like, "But why does the moon of Titan rotate in the opposite direction of all the other planets?" And then look at me and I go, "Well, the thing about a celestial body is that..."
Kid, I wasn't expecting this long of an answer.
Yeah. Do you ever find yourself getting into long conversations with children?
Yeah, I really like talking to kids, actually.
So when I ask a kid...
Not because I'm as smart as they are.
Yeah. When I ask a kid about their experience, they're able to distill it down to a very concise reason of why they like or dislike a place.
Yeah.
So, for example, "Oh, you were at your grandma and grandpa's this weekend? Was it fun?" "Yes, because we go fishing." Boom. That's the review. If only we could be going to hotels.com and be reviewing things like this. "Was the American in War Road, Minnesota nice?" "Yes, it had a pool."
So no rating system whatsoever, merely
verbal reviews.
Verbal or not written reviews?
No, verbal. Like, you got to record it because people are going to think twice if they have to record it, and so it's something can get played. And then you can also kind of hear what's going on in the background so that, like, if you hear the sound of a flush, you don't take that review as seriously.
Yeah.
Or maybe you do if it's reviewing the JJ Meets World branded toilet paper.
Yeah, a lot of French people are reviewing this Dairy Queen here in Akron.
Where's Akron? Do you mean Akron?
No, I mean Akron.
What state is Akron in?
Akron's in South Dakota. Akron, South Dakota? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're like, did you ever have someone who called it a washroom or like General Washington, like where they add the R in there?
I'm not recalling it, but I
My
celebrated.
grandmother did that.
Well, that's awesome. She should have.
Yeah.
More people should do that.
I mean, it's one of those things where I noticed it finally one day where she's like, "Oh, I gotta go. I'm having my washing machine serviced." And I go, "You're what?"
Sometimes it's fun to intentionally say words differently because at a certain age, you're like, I've said this word so many times in my life. That's kind of boring to say it like that. So I could say, hey, can you move the glurb off the turble? And you know what I probably mean.
I'd be worried you're having a stroke. That's what I'd be worried about. I would start doing the smile. So is it fast or is it smile?
What do you mean?
Like when someone's having a stroke, there's an acronym that you're supposed to follow.
Oh,
and it's either smile or fast.
Oh,
I can't remember.
I don't know. I thought you were saying someone is having a stroke either because they're smiling or they suddenly get really fast.
So every single track meet I've ever been to, a lot of strokes happening there. And of course, family photos, everyone's having a stroke during those situations. I'm going to leave you on this note.
Coffee's kicking in.
One of my favorite movies that is just horrible is a movie called King Ralph, starring Mr.
King
John
Ralph.
Goodman and Peter O'Toole and John Hurt. The premise of King Ralph is the entire royal family is killed after they sit on an aluminum bench that happens to get electrified during a family photo. And so the entire royal family is knocked out. So they have to go through all of these birth certificates to find someone of a royal lineage to put on the throne. And at one point, a duke had an affair with an American maid, or like a maid who moved to the United States and then had children in the United States. And then Ralph was the descendant. And he's a Las Vegas lounge singer. And he's, so they bring him over to England. They teach him how to be English. Anyway, where I'm trying to get at with this thing is you guys should give King Ralph a shot.
And then watch
why?
the movie where Chris Rock runs for president.
Head of State?
Head of State.
I love Head of State.
Yes.
Who are you going to vote for? For what? President of what? The United States of what? America of what? That is a phenomenal movie. And if more politicians could only be like that. But so let me bring this thing full circle.
Okay.
I think you should watch the movie King Ralph. Or if you enjoy the movie King Ralph and you have for years, you've watched on TBS, TNT, USA Up All Night, probably not any of the major networks. Occasionally it's on HBO. If you like King Ralph or have been amused by King Ralph, go on Amazon and give it a star rating worthy of your enjoyment. Because right now, I'm going to look this up right now and see what King Ralph is rated at the time of this recording
JJ,
on
what should
Amazon.
someone do, though, if they watch the movie and they hate it so much, they don't even want to give it a 1 star?
If they want to give it a 0 stars,
Yeah.
then I would suggest that they raise the money and remake the film King Ralph to their specifications.
Regardless of it, I've seen King Ralph. There are things in that movie to take away that should give it at least a star or 2.
Right. Oh, I think at least a 2. I would say King Ralph is probably like a 4.
Was it released on any other format besides VHS?
Oh, yeah, you can get it on DVD.
Can you get it on Blu-ray?
Oh, my God. I don't know why I'm doing such a push. King Ralph is sitting at 4.5 stars.
Yeah.
With 168 reviews. So let's see if someone gave this a 1-star review. Oh, 6% of the people gave it a 1 star.
How many of those wish they could have 0?
But get this. Okay, so this is interesting. The first 1-star review, the disc looked like it had been used for the past 20 years. And then the actual review, the disc looked like it had been used for the last 20 years. Far from being new. I got ripped.
So there's actually only 5 1-star reviews because that's really a review
Right.
of the condition of the disc.
The next review, the stupid thing didn't even work. Which technically could be a review of the character King Ralph, but
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Faulty discs.
The
Did
next-
Dynex print these?
The next one says yuck. After that, need to read full description. My fault. Should have read the complete description, but got my movie, but can't play.
But they think it was like a Roseanne-like movie of the week.
This one, I got the wrong movie. So this copy of King...
then
so-
how many of the 5-star reviews are for people who also actually saw King Ralph?
Good call. So these are people who accidentally bought it in PAL format. PAL format.
Sorry, guys, I was trying to buy Moulin Rouge. Moulin Rouge, I'm going to put 5 stars for it right here. I haven't seen King Ralph.
So this is the first review. This is reviewed June 15th, 2018. the movie equivalent of a kegger. This movie is a perfect example of the classic that flies under the radar. If you take a cast this good, give them a flaky and sort of silly premise, and then give them some feel-good room and decent set pieces, you get a cheerfully entertaining, upbeat, and rather sly comedy like this. Everyone is relaxed and having a good time. You will too.
You know, I know we're kind of going a little bit long on this intro, but I'd like to say that I believe this might be a new segment that we should add to a few episodes of the podcast going forward. And people who are listening, you chime in, you tell us on Facebook if you'd like to hear this. But JJ has seen more movies than most people will ever see. Mm-hmm. And he knows a lot about a lot of obscure movies that you would have never heard of.
Or like Mansquito?
Or would even think to rent if you saw it. And I think maybe JJ should be, right before like we go into an interview, be giving a quick shout out to a movie you probably haven't seen out there and a quick justification of why you should make yourself watch it.
That's an excellent idea. Although I feel like after my second review and someone goes and pays to rent it on Amazon for $2.99, they're going to be like, forget that. I'm not donating to his Patreon anymore. He owes me $3. So listen, this is a very long intro, so I'm going to keep this last part short. Our guest today is Mr. Dan Cash, my actual boss who signs my paychecks at the end of the day. We have a very fun conversation with Dan. It goes all over the place. We talk about radio and kind of its importance, how marketing is such an essential tool, and he even teaches us a couple things about life. I don't remember what those are, but I'm sure they're very important. So sit back, relax. This episode of JJ Meets World with Mr. Dan Cash.
JJ Meets World.
Welcome to the podcast, Dan Cash, the guy who signs my paychecks. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm pretty good. I am excited for you to be on this podcast because we really haven't had like a business leader on here yet. So let's talk about business, I guess. I know very little about it.
Okay.
So anything you say is going to... My knowledge of business begins and ends with the game Monopoly.
Sure.
Which I feel like I'm pretty good at.
And
so
the movie
I assume,
Risky Business.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've thought about opening a brothel in my home several times. But my parents never went away for longer than a day or two.
It's not zoned correctly either.
I would like to say, by the way, that most business leaders are excited about the prospect of being invited to an interview. It was actually me who has consistently begged to be on, and I'm so excited to finally get that chance.
Good. I'm glad. So, first and foremost, you're not from the Fargo-Moorhead area. You're a transplant.
I am. I moved here 5 years ago from Kalamazoo, Michigan. I'm originally from Metro Detroit, grew up there, went to school at Western Michigan University, and in 2013, in September, Midwest Radio, which is who I work for, bought 6 radio stations here in town: KFGO, Y94, Froggy, Duke FM, Jack FM, and 740 The Fan. And I came over in the deal, as I like to say. So I was a part of the trade, player to be named later. I showed up a few months after we took over. And when I came here, I literally had 6 suits, a flat screen TV, and my Chrysler Sebring, and just didn't care about anything else. Left it back in Kalamazoo, drove here, and the first night, watched Taylor Swift, and then I was off and running.
And now you have 7 suits and a wife.
That is true. Yes. Yeah.
Kalamazoo sounds like a great place to be from, merely because you get to say, oh, me? I'm from Kalamazoo.
Yes, and actually they sell T-shirts in the airport that says, yes, there really is a Kalamazoo.
Rolls off the tongue.
It's like Lake Titicaca, right?
Very similar.
If I went there, I'd want the T-shirt.
Oh, absolutely.
That'd be part of the trip.
And you know what's funny? I lived in Kalamazoo for 9 years, never got a T-shirt, not once. And now
Really?
I want a T-shirt because I don't live there.
What was it like moving from Michigan to North Dakota? Was it a culture shock?
You know, it was there. I mean, it wasn't. I had been a lot of places. I mean, I didn't just. You know, I lived in Kalamazoo, but before that, I lived in Detroit, so I was exposed to a lot of different types of things. And when I got here, I remember some specific things. You know, when I first moved here, my boss at the time had said to me, as I was looking for places to live, look, there are basically 3 things that you need. And number 1 is you need to look for a place downtown. There needs to be a heated garage, and you need to be on the second floor. And I thought, well, okay, that's kind of weird. And I finally said, well, why do I have to live downtown? And he said, well, you have to live downtown because I've only been here a little bit. I don't know what there is to do. However, there are a lot of bars I see around that area. That was one. And then the heated parking. It's really cold here in the winter. Got to have that. All right. Well, I got that set up. And then the third one on the second floor, well, it does flood sometimes. So I had the three things covered. And once I got that, I felt really good about it. But I didn't really delve into the culture shock part of it until I met my wife, who took me all around North Dakota, and her family exposed me to some things that I never, ever had seen before.
Because her folks are from is it Leeds? Is it that
Yeah,
area?
Leeds, Churches Ferry. So, about 90 miles west of Devil's Lake. I think I'm right.
And they have a farmstead out there?
Yeah, they basically go out there and they have cattle and that type of deal way up there, and actually closer to Can-Do for that.
So you have now been fully integrated into the country cowboy lifestyle of, oh boy, this is a work weekend. We're going on a trip to see Kayla's family, but really I know that I'm going to end up having to do some work while I'm out there.
Oh, no. They've attempted to make me do work, and they realized very quickly that I'm a terrible person for work. When it comes to actually manual labor, it's not for me. I don't know what I'm doing.
Did you have to get some reclaimed barn wood at one point? Were you telling me a story about that? Where
Yeah.
you had to trudge across like a quarter mile of snow?
So it was one of Kayla's relatives, her uncle. His family had an old farmstead, and I went out there, and we were looking for this particular piece of barn wood that actually we could take, and it would be like the doors, and we could slide them in our basement, which would be a cool kind of door to open our theater, which was my mastermind, of course, to build a theater. And we got there, and they're like, yeah, we think we got some really good ones. And it had snowed, and it was probably, I would say at the time, there was at least 20 inches of snow on the ground, maybe over a few-day period. And so we had to trudge through to what would have been, kind of an old garage or shop, and it was very small, and these things were just buried in the shop. And I'm walking through 20 inches of snow, and of course, we got the truck stuck in the snow. So we were finally stuck at what was at the time an abandoned farmstead, couldn't do anything, had to call my brother-in-law to come get us out. However, by the time he got us out, we had already pushed ourselves out. So he arrived and we were driving away.
Oh.
But it was a pretty fun experience to be carrying barnwood, out.
This is something that I tell people who are transplants to North Dakota, which is if you ever go into the ditch or you get your truck stuck somewhere and it's snowing, you have to be careful because you're like, I've got to wait until AAA gets here or the tow truck. While it's snowing, the snow can actually bury your muffler, and it can actually, like the carbon dioxide, the muffler, like the exhaust goes back into the vehicle, and people die on a very regular basis who don't understand that running their car while it's snowing, the snow can compact and like plug it. Did you know that?
I had no idea, first off. And what I would also like to say is that I hear these stories of just
How
these
people die?
how these people die, and horrific snowstorms, and how people were, their vehicles were stuck in the 70s for like days at a time. And I think back and I go, I don't understand how that happened. And then people go, well, cars have evolved. Emergency services have evolved since that time. It just doesn't happen as much in, Fargo anymore. But it certainly still happens out west. I know that for sure. And as you go into the country.
Have you seen that iconic photo of, it was a storm maybe in the 50s where you can only see the top of the telephone poles?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what's funny about that? I swear that photo shows up pretty much every year about the same time, and people just randomly post it. And I liken it to the same time frame as the people that were in Kalamazoo in 1980 when the tornado went through downtown. Constantly, it feels like it happens every week when I was there, that someone would be like, it is 1 year more since the tornado went through Kalamazoo in 1980. And it's kind of similar to 57 when the tornado hit here. It's amazing how I always forget when those things happen, and there are people that are on it. Like they just know that's the day this happened.
I find that, so have you ever met someone who shows you their scars? And they're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I got this scar because, I got shot in Afghanistan, or I got this scar because I was riding a bull. To me, major storms are like scars that communities share, and we're proud of them because we survived through this thing. Our community was able to thrive even though this horrific fire took place or this tornado took out 3/4 of the town. And
That's a much better way to put it than what I was thinking.
it's all right. You were saying it, and then I got to think about it the whole time.
Yeah.
So.
Do you ever feel bad for people who have scars on their face because they don't get to decide to show you? They can't offer, like, you want to see my scar? Because it's like, I see it. I've already seen it. I see it every day because it's on your face.
Do you ever feel bad for people who are trying to do the floss last night and accidentally slam their hand into the side of their countertop and then they have a little blood and it's just, and you tell your wife it's gushing, but it's not, and it's just really barely touched?
I feel really bad for those people, yeah.
Yeah. Did you need a Band-Aid for that? It
I
doesn't
didn't.
look like it needs a Band-Aid.
I really
but
fought through.
That's one of those ones where you change the story if someone asks.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you don't go, I was flossing. You say, like, oh, we were being mugged and I killed the guy.
I have got one major scar on my body, and it's on my little elbow here, if you can see
look at
this.
that thing. Yeah, look
and
at that.
so
It is.
I'm going to tell you the story of this scar.
Okay.
I was working at the Fargo Theater at the time, box office manager, very proud of that. I got to pick the M&Ms we ordered for the concessions area. So I got all these fancy M&Ms. That has nothing to do with this, but I've been trying to work it into the last 3 episodes of this podcast. So I'm driving home, and I was driving a Yukon XL at the time. You could put a queen-size mattress in the back of that baby. I loved it. And I am on I-94 headed west towards my apartment, and it was right after the 25th Street Bridge, and there was somebody who was merging onto the interstate, I was in the middle lane, and someone merged in front of me from the far left lane, and I had to go into the far right lane so that I would not collide with them on the interstate. But there was a person who was fully stopped in the right-hand lane because he didn't speed up fast enough to zipper into traffic. And I didn't see him because there was a giant semi there. So I get over here, and it's that moment where I go like, oh, damn it. And the next thing I know, I passed out. My car is upside down 50 yards further down the interstate, and the airbag has gone off, and I hear this ringing in my ears. I had my seatbelt on, so I am fine. It held me in exactly the way it's supposed to. Again, I am upside down. My car Jerry Bruckheimered itself across the interstate, and I click the seatbelt, fall to the roof of my car, and as I'm crawling out, because I wasn't really paying attention to anything at the time, I cut my elbow on some of the glass.
That's where you got it?
That's where I got it.
You know, that's pretty sweet.
Dan's story was better. I mean, that
Is
dude
that
was
dancing?
flossing, man.
I was trying to floss, which, by the way, my hips, they don't move like I should.
Oh, that's too bad.
Can I just say, by the way, that when I used to be a radio producer when I was first starting, and I would jump in on a very well-established news talk show. The guy had been on for 15 years, and I would jump in with random comments. And he started calling me on the air the king of non sequiturs. And I got to say, that story is just perfect
I just
for it.
can shoehorn it right
You
in.
just built it right in.
One of my favorite parts of this podcast is at the beginning finding a way to go from whatever story I want to talk about into the guest for the
Because he never
for
really
today.
finds a way.
No, it'll be like, oh, and speaking of space travel, our guest today has never been in outer space.
It's like, JJ, I wanted you to help me move the piano out of the house. I didn't want you to tear the wall down to do it.
That's some of the best stuff. Okay, so let's get back to Dan since we've got Dan here.
Sure.
So you've had a full career in radio that's been from behind the mic in front of doing YouTube videos for radio stations, and now you're running a network of stations. So tell us how you got into radio.
Sure. So I remember it very vividly. It was a warm September day. No, I'm sitting.
Was it cold?
It was warm. It was definitely. I feel the warmth.
He wears suits all the time. So if there's a man who knows when it's warm out, it's Dan.
It's 110 degrees, and everyone's like, "Why are you wearing a suit?" I'm like, "Well, I'm an established individual, and
So I'm going to call my body fat as my suit.
What I've actually started saying now is I've gained a little weight. It's been, there's a lot of food in North Dakota, so I don't like taking my suit jacket off. So my story goes back to it'd be 2004, and I was a sophomore in college at Western Michigan University, and I'll remember I was sitting in in the library, and it's at that point where as a sophomore you don't even have an idea, like what you're going to do, but you don't know how to get there, and so you're kind of taking your gen eds and mostly wasting your money or your parents' money at that time because none of it's really actually getting you where you need to go. And then you get to a point where you get an email, and so I had this email. I was in at the time my major was called broadcast cable production, which I wanted to be a TV anchor. That was 100% what I wanted to do. I wanted to be Tom Brokaw, Peter Jennings. I mean, the big guys at the time. And I'll never forget that the reason I picked Western Michigan was in my dumb young head, I thought to myself, by the way, doing no research, well, Western Michigan's about 2 hours from Chicago, so I'm sure they have connections with internships. Not realizing that both Michigan State and Central Michigan had two of the best broadcast programs in the country. I mean, in the top 15, both of them. So I just didn't even think about it and went to Western because I had this perception in my head that Central Michigan just, not for me, which going to Western makes sense because they hate each other. So long story short, get this email, and it's at a radio station. They're looking for an internship, a local one. Great. That's awesome. All right, I'll do that. So I go in and I interview, and I'm thinking to myself, well, it's not TV, but at least it's close, right? It's broadcast. So I get this internship, and it's in news. And this starts what is probably so many people's career in broadcast media, which is you start out as an intern, and you instantly realize that the unpaid internship, which you're going there to get experience, is basically a full-time job. And you are going to work all summer long as much as you really want. But by the way, it'd be nice if you'd work a little more. And I did. And I basically went out and I was an intern in the news department for a local radio station operator.
And so did radio just click with you then? Or did someone finally say, like, Dan, you're never going to be on TV?
So
Terry Bradshaw, all these players are retiring and then getting into sports casting. There's never going to be an opening on Sports Center for you.
That's a good point.
Technology advances. We're just going to clone Brian Williams. So this market's closed, buddy.
I will speed it up and say it this way. So I didn't have somebody say that. The next year, 1 year later, I was actually a part-time employee. Midwest Radio, Midwest Communications came in and they bought the stations I was at. And so I'll never forget a guy named Peter Tans walks in. He had a Bluetooth on his ear, which I was like, who is this guy?
He's big business.
And I knew at the time that if you had a folder that was in your mailbox that you would continue on with Midwest. And so I had a folder, and I went in there. This is great. Okay, well, I'm gonna. And he says we're gonna need a full-time news person as a part of this. And I was like, okay, well, I want to be a TV anchor, so I'll get into news. And long story short, that day the sports director quits and decides that he's just not gonna do this. And they look at me and go, well, we know you like sports. Do you want to not be the sports director? You're 20 years old. Would you like to be in sports, not news? And I was like, yeah. That's great. And then the next day, I had my own sports show.
Wow.
Out of nowhere.
Wow.
So no one ever said, don't do TV. And by the way, I had that in my head for many years afterwards that I still wanted to be in TV.
And have you given up on it now?
I've given up now, but as I started to do sports, and for me, I don't know if you can tell this just in this initial interaction, but I really like to talk. But I really like to talk to other people and not necessarily
not to yourself as much.
Exactly. And so as I'm sitting in a room alone, bored out of my mind, talking to people and no one's calling, and my dad is the only one who's calling with a disguised voice, calling himself the Angry Man, which he thought this was a bit that everyone could understand. And I'm like, Dad, this is awful. And then my brothers started calling just because they felt bad for me. And at that point, I was like, I got to do something else. I can't do this. So I got involved in the background where I could do video and try to incorporate digital media into what we did at the radio stations. Now, I can say this now, having been with Midwest for 14 years, somewhere in that range, and knowing everyone really well, that I 100% was thinking in my head, all right, if I get a video camera, I could build a reel, and then maybe I can get back into television. And that was my whole deal. Now, that didn't materialize, but that was my idea.
You know, it's funny you say that because I've interacted with your dad twice, and he's easily one of my favorite people I've ever met, like just in line at a bar.
I think it's an amazing concept for a character. Would be like a main character is a radio host, and then like a fledgling radio show, and then the only person who calls in is his dad, who's trying to affect a character,
right?
And the host does not want his dad to do it.
Yep. So that's the thing is, I'm sure when Dan was like, "Dad, I've got my own sports show," your dad thought, Dan's got his own show that I'm going to be a big part of.
Yes, actually,
immediately.
You're pretty close because it's more like Dan's got his own show, which means we got our own show. That's exactly how my dad thinks. And to this day, I deal with that. He's like, to this day, and if we back up, I can explain where that comes from. So I wrestled in high school, and I was like, I would say I was in the middle, right? I mean, and it set the stage for everything I'm going to do in my life, which is to coach other people and basically be a coach as opposed to being an all-star, right? So here I am, sophomore in high school, and they do these things where if you're going to be on varsity, you have to do a wrestle off, which means you have to beat another person on the team, and if you're number one, you're varsity. Okay, this is something that's done in practice. It's private. Like, you're just there with your team. My dad shows up to the wrestle-off. He's standing 5 feet from me. No fans are there. And he's like, I can see him. He's chewing his finger like, come on, Danny boy, win this match. We need this. So that would be the beginning of my life in broadcasting.
And then did you win? Did you get on varsity?
I did.
And then he was like, the Cash family is back.
That's we're on varsity is what he was saying.
With a last name like Cash, which is spelled like Cash, like Cash.
Yes.
Has your life been a series of puns?
Constantly.
Like, people are like, damn, if you have a daughter, are you going to name her Penny?
Yes.
Stuff like that.
That exact thing. And actually, just literally last night, one of my best friend's wives was there, and they're having a baby, and they're saying to my wife and I, so we've come up with the perfect name. Whether it is a daughter or a son, it doesn't matter. We've got a great name. And they'd actually looked it up that somebody had said this is one of the top 18 baby names that you wouldn't, that they'll never have the same name in the class. Like if you're and it was, and I'm not kidding, this is an actual name, Winsome. Winsome Cash.
I like that.
And I was like, how could I do that to my child? But yes, every day of my life has been that way.
If you name your child on delivery, when they are putting their name on a test, it would be Cash on delivery.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and then you just like, this is our baby, COD.
You know, actually, when they were asking this question last night, my wife's like on board with this concept, and I was like, Kayla, why can't we just name this kid Jake? If we have a kid, Jake Cash is a professional baseball player or a golfer. That is the kind of name. To me, that is a very strong. I can feel myself going towards where my dad is. You know, I mean, it's like I'm living vicariously through my child. I don't even have one yet.
I would recommend you name your child Cash, so they're Cash.
Oh, someone actually offered that option
That's
yesterday.
a good one.
That is
Do
a good
that one.
I feel like it's. You like the movie Happy Gilmore?
Yes, I love that movie.
Okay, so I love the villain in that, Shooter McGavin.
Oh, yeah.
And because his name is Shooter, he's got this little like thing that he does like when he gets like a shot. Your child already has this built-in thing, you know, like I don't know if they can make the look of a register or like making it rain, like is their signature move.
Don't you recall though, I don't know if this is true or not, but I had heard that the real actor, when he got pulled over for like potentially drunk driving, he like when the cop came up, he was like, "Don't you know who I am? I'm Shooter McGavin."
Yep.
Is that true?
Yep. Christopher McDonald.
Christopher McDonald. Mm-hmm. He is one of the most underappreciated actors, I think, out there. He is so good. And
he's a great villain.
He's so good in that movie, too, because he does exactly what you need the villain to do.
Yeah.
And that's really underappreciated. You think, oh, he must just be a jerk. That's why he's good at playing a jerk. No, like to be that kind of a jerk. Like his delivery on the I eat pieces of shit like you for breakfast. You eat pieces of shit for breakfast?
No. Happy Gilmore is one of those movies as a kid that I knew every single word. So if it was on in the other room, I could just start mouthing along the words and follow along.
Same thing.
And it got me into golf. That's why I started playing golf when I was younger, was because I wanted to Happy Gilmore it. Have you ever tried
100%.
to tee off?
Are you kidding? I mean, isn't that like what anyone in our age group was like, yes, this is what I have to do?
Golf 101.
My introduction to golf was Dorf on Golf, starring Tim Conway.
You know, have you ever seen the Dorf shorts?
I think I have. It's been a while.
So Tim Conway just gets down on his knees and pretends to play like a little person.
Okay.
And Dorf, like there was a whole series of videos like Dorf
fishing?
goes fishing, you know, Dwarf in Las Vegas.
So we're gonna
Dorf.
keep going on tangents here, but so the Dorf fishing one, in the Dorf fishing one, there are interstitials that are like ads for a 1-800 number to call in for different fishing equipment and stuff, and it's 1-800-DIPFISH. And I watched that in the 3rd grade, and then I remember the last day of 3rd grade, we'd always go on some field trip somewhere. We rode our bikes to Mickelson Park, and I told some friends this number 1-800-DIPFISH, and we were like, let's call it because there's a payphone there. And so we called it. It was a phone sex line.
Oh my
because
gosh.
the numbers matched up with some other
Yeah.
phrase. And we thought it was hilarious because you call one of those numbers, it's a 1-800 number, so we didn't have to put in like money. I think right away you could still get in first. There was some sort of workaround where you could listen in without having to like pay anything.
Sure, you get like the first 25 seconds are free.
Yeah.
So you're calling from like different payphones across the city so you could get that extra 25 seconds each time.
Well, no, you just hang up and you just pick it up again and you start a new.
Oh, the technology wasn't strong enough to recognize where you were yet.
They weren't worried about like little kids calling them up and wasting their time.
There are certain things that the next generation just won't understand. And so payphones are one of those.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that at one point you didn't have a phone, so you'd have to ask a business if you could use their phone, which was hit or miss because some places are like, nope.
You ever tried watching The Matrix these days? Like they're all using payphones to get out of the Matrix.
Oh, you'd never get out.
You'd never get out.
Yeah, you'd be stuck the whole time.
It's a funny story because I one time drove from Kalamazoo to Lincoln, Nebraska, with a guy who had broadcasted like in the middle of Nebraska years ago. He was in like, is it North Platte, like way out west there? And he was telling me a story when they went and did a baseball game and they needed to broadcast. Well, they got there and there was no phone line in the broadcast booth. So he had to run a phone line 1,000 feet to somebody's house, a random person in a neighborhood, and beg them to let him plug in. No one today will ever feel that pain.
No.
That's a rough day.
Oh, I always think it's tough when I have to move the tie line from one side of the table to the other so I can get a better cell signal.
Right.
Like, that's the hardest part of my day. So, Dan, do you remember the first time we met?
I do, 100%.
Okay, what was it?
We were at, well, at least I know that we went to Rooters that night.
Yeah.
And I remember that we were sitting there. There's probably 6 people there. And I remember we talked a lot about you in Chicago and just like learned all about you.
Yeah. What interested me the most was Britta was like, okay, so Dan's my new boss, and so he's going to come out with us tonight, but he's not from Fargo. He doesn't know anyone here. It's not like he, used to live here and then he went to college somewhere else. He is a full-on transplant. And we had a really nice time chatting that night, and we ended up at Frying Pan at the end of the night. And was it like you ate like just every day was like a cheese sandwich for lunch was your favorite lunch or a salad or something?
No, I constantly would eat, it would be eggs, but it would be 6 eggs with only 1 yolk. And then it would also be like I'd get random turkey meat, not deli meat, like that turkey ground up.
Random turkey meat.
Yeah. Well, that's probably I should specify. Like at like Hornbachers, I go grab it and then like literally just mash
Where do you
together
source your
these
turkey?
eggs.
Random places.
But I'd mash them together. I had this like whole health kick that's all I was doing was straight protein, nothing else.
And yeah, because you only had like a salad at that night, or was it?
It could be because I was on a major health kick.
Yeah. Everyone else at the table is like, I'll have the appetizer sampler that you're supposed to share with the table for myself, please. Just ranch. And then the next person's like, I'll have 2 patty melts. And because it's a bar food, right? It's
Right.
at the end of the night and you go out there. And then years later, I end up working for you. And thank you so much for not firing me. I mean, I've lived through
Yet.
2 stations being flipped.
Yeah, that's true.
And now I'm on the #1 station. So this is, I'm really riding high these days.
Look, when you see talent, you got to keep that talent.
Oh, there you go.
No, I'm referring
There
to
you go.
myself.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
So,
And when you find some talent, then what are you going to do with JJ once,
Right.
once they take the spot?
yeah, don't impress him, Tucker.
I keep trying to
Jesus.
fire him from JJ Meets World, but so far, no.
I haven't found another myself so
copyright is
deep.
tough.
I haven't
Yeah.
found a separate JJ to replace him with, which is the difficulty.
J.J. Abrams keeps saying no.
Oh,
I'm too
man.
busy on Star Trek 4.
Someday.
Yeah. So when did you get to the point of where you said, I'm going to transition from the actual broadcast part of media into the business side? Let's make sure that we've got enough money in the bank to keep this train rolling.
Good point. So probably 2007, 2008, I started getting into a place where I really wanted to do digital media, and I actually went to Green Bay and I interviewed in our Green Bay office. And it's actually really funny because I always tell this story that I'm sitting in our Green Bay office and I have been able to not effectively, the most important people at Midwest Communications. I mean, Duke Wright, the president, and you have his, everyone else who's involved in the family, as well as Jeff McCarthy, our vice president of programming. And I am essentially presenting a PowerPoint that shows why I would love to be the director of digital, or at the time, vice president of digital media, something like that. And I'll never forget that I was having these conversations with people that I didn't know, and also probably good for me, didn't realize what level they were at, all of them in the company. So I would argue back on certain points, and looking back, I'm like, why did I do that? Didn't have any idea. And they actually put me in charge of our Michigan digital media. And so my role was to basically help our sales department, train them how to learn and understand and sell our digital media, our websites, that kind of a thing, banner ads at the time, or tile ads, what they used to be called. And then I also would work with our on-air staff to teach them how to blog, or, get more traffic to the websites, and basically just, I hate this word, but engage with our audience a little bit better. So that sort of morphed into me going from market to market. So I was actually at one point overseeing Michigan and Indiana. So I was putting probably 30,000 miles a year on my car, just driving all over. And I just fell in love with, not necessarily, I loved digital media, but I fell in love more with being able to go from market to market. And even though I knew the people in each place, it was different people on pretty much a daily basis. I had my core people I'd work with, but I always found it so cool that you were dealing in different parts of the country that were similar, yet had subtle differences. And that to me was always so fun, because you always had a different challenge every single day.
You could have one good story and it could stretch 6 months worth of telling.
Yeah, that's exactly true. 100%. And then if I had a brilliant thing that I came up with, or that someone came up with and I stole the idea in this market, I could then bring it somewhere else and they'd be like, whoa, that is a great idea. And I'd be like, I had that same reaction in Terre Haute last week.
My grandfather was part of an insurance business, and he told me you need 2 good stories. That's all you need to be a really successful on-site business professional, is especially in the ag world, because you meet the farmer the first time and you tell your good story, and then the second time you meet him, you tell that second good story, and from then you're good to go, and they think you're the most interesting person. And even if every story after that is just garbage, it doesn't matter, because they've already associated you with as the person with the good story or the funny joke and things like that. And he goes, so you just need 2, but you got to put effort into those 2. You got to make sure that you get 2 really quality stories. It can't be something where they start to tune you out afterwards.
Farmers, take note. Don't sign on the dotted line until you're 4 or 5 stories deep.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah. Ask them to stay the night and then watch them sweat.
Don't
Right?
Don't fall for the insurance first.
Do you ever find, though, that like for me, half of my life, I feel is finding another story. I just always, I've gotten to a point where my wife will constantly be like, hey, we need to go out and go to this event, or we're going to be at this thing. And I sometimes feel like, I don't want to go. I'm good for today. I just want to chill, relax at home. And then I get there and I'm like, instantly recognize I'm going to get a story today. I can use this conversation or something that happened in future dealings. And it just, I don't know. My whole life seems to be in search of that next story.
It's too bad that we don't recognize that when we're at a point in our lives when we are going out every single night, no matter what, when that is what you're doing.
Right.
So if I could tell anything to 22-year-old JJ right now, it's, hey, listen, every night come home and jot down some of the stuff you saw tonight because you're going to use that later on. But so many great experiences of my life have just disappeared, have been pushed out of my brain by stuff I don't need to know, like all the words to the Happy Gilmore script. But
Until you're on Jeopardy one day.
Right, and then it's like, oh my God.
Is this Ken Jennings?
Has anyone ever argued with Alex over an answer? I wonder if that's ever happened.
I'm sure there's some smart people that do. They cut it out.
I would like to see the blooper reel of that, where they're like, no, that is horse shit. It was Lady Godiva. I know that.
He's intimidating. And have you ever seen like behind the scenes interviews with him? There's a video of him. He's in the makeup chair and he's kind of being made up. And I don't know what they were doing it for, but some woman was recording him and asking him questions. And she's like, what is it you like to do with your free time? And he goes, manual labor. Got a ranch. Like to do manual labor, right? When that's someone's response to what they'd like to do in their free time, you don't argue with that person.
No.
Yeah, you'd be like, okay, well, you need a little more powder. People don't know this, but it's not like he was either the first host of Jeopardy or that was his first hosting job. He hosted a show called Card Sharks for a while. I think he's been on maybe like 10 or 12 game shows before he got onto Jeopardy. And somebody was actually hosting Jeopardy before he got there. It only got super popular.
I got to look this up now. Do you know who the host was?
I don't know.
I thought it began with him.
A safe bet would be Merv Griffin because he Merv Griffith, excuse me. Wait.
No.
Griffin. Griffin. Yeah, Andy Griffith. Yeah, is what I was thinking of. But he didn't host anything. He was Matlock.
True.
But it's one of those things where do you have Game Show Network?
Yeah.
Yeah. So every now and then I'll be flipping through the channels and I'll land on Game Show Network and it'll be Alex Trebek, the host of Card Sharks.
What? Like how long ago are we talking?
Oh, like 70s. Like his mustache is still brown.
Oh, that's old.
Yeah, and he's wearing the worst color suit you've ever seen. But I'm sure in 1976 it was popular.
Right.
Do you ever worry about that when you see pictures? Like you took some photos yesterday. I saw them on Facebook.
Yeah.
Do you ever worry that 20 years from now you're going to look back and be like, ooh, that was a bad style choice?
I do, but not so much when I'm dressed like comfortably. It's more with suits. So like recently, I usually have like blue or black or maybe like a gray suit. But recently my wife took me out and she's like, you need some summer colors. It's the lighter, it won't be so hot. And I show up to work with a pink suit jacket, a very vibrant blue. And I look at that and I go, these photos years from now I'm going to look back and go, what was I thinking?
Be like, it was the wife.
It was.
Checking in on Jeopardy. So it was created by Merv Griffin. And then and then it moved to daytime on NBC, and then it was hosted by Art Fleming. And then when it began the daily syndicated version, that's when Alex Trebek stepped in. So basically, the current version of Jeopardy as we know it, that was like a new iteration that was starting, and he was at the beginning of that.
So basically what you're saying is that the original show they had was not ready for prime time, and they were like, this is clearly a good concept. Now we need a professional to do it.
Right. Well, and they were only producing one a week, I assume, right?
I think it was a weekly night. It started as a weekly nighttime syndicated one.
So
and then it went to a daytime NBC.
So Art Fleming probably was getting paid more because they're like, okay, so the daily one we're going to do is going to be, we're going to sell detergent ads during it. And it'll be like when they turned Price is Right from a once a week like tune-in show to it's just every single day at the same time frame.
Do you think though that like, I wonder if Trebek sits at home at night, probably in his $1 million mansion and thinks, this is all I'm known for. Like maybe he wanted, what were his dreams? Like, what did he want to be? Did he just want to be the host of one show, or was he wanting to be an actor? Or did he want to I don't know, did he want to be a bobsledder?
That's
there had
a
to be
good
something,
question.
Right? Everyone's got dreams.
No one says, I want to be a game show presenter.
No.
Even when we don't know that.
Even when game shows were popular, even when they were popular, they wanted to win at a game show, or they had an idea for one and they wanted to Merv Griffin that thing.
That's true, but I feel like Bob Barker was born with that skinny microphone. He just was ready to go.
I got to do a quick update here. So Merv Griffin actually never hosted it.
Okay.
He just created the show. But the first host was Art Fleming, and then it went to Alex Trebek. So one host before Trebek.
Can we just say...
Sorry for the confusion there.
No, just in the King of Non Sequitur moment, we actually just brought something together there because I brought in like Bob Barker, and we were talking about Happy Gilmore, and then you have to remember the Price is
Oh my
Wrong.
gosh. Yes.
What
Well
a
done.
line.
See, we know
So-
what we're doing here.
Do you know Alex Trebek has connections to Fargo?
No.
Yeah, he's in town either once or twice a year. His wife has direct connections here, so every now and then I'll see posts. Someone's like, "I was at Twist tonight and I met Alex Trebek."
So if you're out there in the FM area and you are connected to Alex Trebek, please help us get him on JJ Meets World. I'm sure he can't wait to do it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I love most about Fargo is that type of thing. It's also one of the things that if you're not in a good mood, you can be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this person was related to this person and I didn't understand what was happening there and I said something and I shouldn't have said something. But one of the great things is, unlike anywhere I have ever lived, that stuff happens. I find it amazing that you can be, walking down the street and, Josh Jamal, that's cool. Like, that's awesome. He's, obviously the guy in North Dakota, but like Danny Masterson's taking a photo outside of the Fargo Theater or just all these like random people that just show up and you're like, there they are. And they feel so comfortable. Like, okay, so this week, my favorite band, I worked this into the podcast,
Good.
Guster, was in town. And very few people, Guster is like a cult following, but they have like a lot of fans. They'll do 2,500, 5,000 person shows. So they come to Fargo and we bring them to the radio station on Thursday to do a live acoustic performance, which is actually really cool. So then I am driving the lead singer, Ryan Miller, and the drummer, Brian Rosenworcel, home back to what would have been Sanctuary where they were doing a show. And about 8 blocks from downtown, Ryan Miller looks at me and he goes, hey, and he's looking at his phone. He's on a map. He goes, all right, so we're going north. He goes, okay, cool. He goes, can you drop me off? And I was thinking like, oh man, did I say something? Like, what did I do? Is this car not nice enough for him? And he goes, no, man, I just want to experience Fargo. And I was like, okay. So I literally dropped him 8 blocks from the Sanctuary and he walked for like 2 or 3 hours everywhere. Just walked all through downtown.
Wow.
That to me could only happen in Fargo. Only. They wouldn't feel comfortable doing that anywhere.
I've always said you could open up a small B&B in Fargo that caters to the extreme celebrities because people in Fargo don't go up and hassle other folks. Jeff Bridges has said it about Fargo, about how much he likes being here because he's not constantly hounded. There will be fans who come up to him, but it's not like if one fan comes up, 100 come up. You don't get mobbed. James Spader has spent a lot of time in Fargo because his better half is from here originally. In fact,
Same with Bridges.
I used to get my hair cut from the woman who did Spader's better half's hair. And so I remember her telling me, she's like, yeah, he's got to go do some movie. He's the voice of a robot. And she was telling me some plot points. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the plot of Age of Ultron. Nobody's supposed to know this. And he was letting it spill to you? What?
No, but here's the problem is his wife is letting it spill. That's where it came from, right?
No, because he would just sit with her. He'd go and sit while she's getting her hair done.
Oh.
And so she'd be talking. And that's the nice thing is because Tammy didn't make a big, oh my gosh, it's James Spader. James Spader is here. It was just James, and he would hang out. And I've heard that from other folks there was a band. Oh, I wish I could remember what it was. Someone playing at the Dome who went to a little guitar shop in downtown Fargo and tried out guitars all afternoon and walked away with like spending like $15,000 on guitars, which of course to this shop makes their month.
Right.
And it's also a cool thing because they have all these pictures now of so-and-so trying out guitars. And he was like, you don't really find shops like this anywhere else. And yeah, Fargo is this gem. Also, when you leave Fargo, I have found it to be the best calling card ever. It's a icebreaker like unlike anything else.
But do you ever run into a situation where let's say you're in like Mexico or Jamaica or something, you're just on a vacation and somebody's like, so where are you from? And they're like expecting, like New York or Los Angeles or whatever. And you're like Fargo, or you usually say like North Dakota. And then they are like, it's silence. Like it's usually silence to start. And then you usually have to throw in Fargo. And now at least you get a movie conversation started and you can say, we all hate that movie. Maybe you could come up with something else about Fargo. I'll tell you about 10 more things. And then it brings on a whole conversation. But I always have the silence at first when I say North Dakota.
Oh, this is more often than not. 6 years ago, I was doing a show on the USS Lexington down in Corpus Christi, Texas. And I said, I'm in Texas. I want to go eat some real Texas barbecue. So we went to a place called Schmitty's in Lubbock, Texas.
That's like real.
It's real. Yeah. I mean, they haven't done anything to this place in years. You buy coleslaw by the tub, and they serve you on
like a big belt buckle.
I wish. Oh my God, wouldn't that be great? So you walk into Schmitty's and there's 6 people there. It's long tables, so everyone eats family style like that. And you go back and you order where they smoke all the meat, and then they just hand you this tray of meat to go back to your seat.
You're effectively describing where he eats in House of Cards.
Yeah, exactly. It felt exactly like that.
Oh, was Freddie there? Or?
Oh, I wish.
That would have been good.
So we go back there, and it's my friend Jake Harchie and myself, and a woman who's taking our order, the pit master, and then a guy behind us. And I said, I'm so excited. This is my first Texas barbecue experience. And she goes, oh yeah, where are you from? And I said, oh, I'm from Fargo, North Dakota. And she's like, what? And I was like, yeah, Fargo, North Dakota. She goes, I grew up in Grand Forks.
Really?
And she goes, yeah, I moved down here to go to college. And the pit master goes, I'm from Thief River Falls. And she's like, yeah, he's from Thief River Falls. And we're like, this is amazing. Like, I can't believe we've got all these connections right here. And the guy behind us says, I'm a long haul trucker based out of Mandan. And I'm like, there is no flipping way that all of these people can be together in the same spot. So I'm in the Dominican Republic this last December. And my sister gets into a fight with a woman in the pool who is mad that my sister has had a floaty for like an hour.
Okay.
And she feels that other people need to be able to use the floaties. And it became a thing where they brought in the concierge, and I said, we've got 6 rooms. This bitch only has 1 room. kick her the hell out of here. Like, which money are you going to lose here? And then this woman, the concierge, doesn't speak any English. She only speaks Spanish.
Sure.
And then this woman called me a he, she, and then I flipped out.
She called you a he,
She called me a he, she. And she spit on me, like, while we were talking. So after this is all done, there, like, some people who are sitting in the cabana on the other side of this lazy river goes, what was that crazy woman all about? And we explain, like, yeah, she was just going nuts. And they're like, yeah, yesterday I saw her yelling at a pool boy, and she obviously just is an unhappy woman. We're like, yeah, I know, it's weird. I never have confrontations like that. We're from an area where you just don't do that. And they said, well, us too. We're from Moorhead.
What?
And we're from Minnesota. And I'm like, oh, what part of Minnesota? Moorhead. We're from Fargo. And so this conversation is loud enough that somebody 2 cabanas down goes, I go to UND. And I'm like, this is nuts. And that happens to me everywhere where someone's got some connection.
You know, now that you're saying that, it's making me think of November. My wife and I were in Hawaii. We were in Kona. And we get off the plane. We had just gotten there. And of course, I mean, you can't get much further in the United States. Well, you can't in the United States, right? And so I'm sitting there, and we get on the like an airport shuttle to go get our rental car. And there's a guy there, and it's one of those circumstances where you're like, this guy looks a little sketchy, but he's gonna get us there. And it's like 11 o'clock at night, which means it's what? I mean, like 4 a.m. here, 3 a.m. And so we're exhausted. We've been flying all day. And the guy's like, so where are you from? And we're like, okay, here we go. And it's like, well, we're from Fargo. And he goes, oh, yeah. He goes, I spent 15 years in Grand Forks. And I'm like, what? Never would I ever expect that. But he was at the Air Force Base, and he was based there for a long time. And he'd moved to Hawaii because he just, wanted to be there. And I was like, how does this happen?
Yeah.
So I've essentially contradicted my original story of people not knowing anything about Fargo.
It's all right.
It happens.
Does it happen to people in Maryland?
No.
Probably not.
No. Well, and I know it doesn't happen to people in Detroit. I mean, there's just, I think when you have such a high population, when there's that many people, it's not as cool. Whereas here it's like, this hidden gem that is becoming less and less hidden.
I like to think of it too as not the Midwest, but the North. So we are part of the Midwest, but we're Northerners, which means like we're sort of hardy in a certain kind of way. And so I like to think of it that way too. And also like Maryland, a lot of people are from there. There's just a huge population there. Running into someone from Maryland isn't as it's not going to stand out in your mind as much as running into someone from Fargo.
Right. The odds of running into someone who's lived in New York City is better than running into someone who's from North Dakota.
But if the U.S. were Game of Thrones, then North Dakota would be the Starks.
Yes, for sure.
I think, the Northerners.
Minnesota would be the Starks. North Dakota would be the band of people that's run by the little girl.
On Bear Island. Yep, that's Bear Island.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm blanking on it at the moment.
Yeah.
But
Do you watch Game of Thrones?
You know what?
the Mormont family
Because
is on Bear Island.
I feel like we've lost Dan in this
I am
conversation
a legit
quickly.
fan of Game of Thrones, but I will say this, and it's probably blasphemy. I stopped after season 2. I don't know why. I tried to get back into it, and it was like once I got off the hook of being involved, it was so overwhelming to me.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been able to get back in. It's one of those shows that I'm like, I need to get back into that show because I loved every second of it. My brother and I'd watch every Sunday, and I just couldn't get back into it.
Well, and at this point, you'd have to rewatch season 1 and 2.
I really should. Yeah, I really should.
It's TV nowadays is an undertaking because there's so much great TV out there.
Yep.
That when you get into a show, and they're making shows that are 7 seasons long with 28 episodes a season, and they're either 30 minutes or they're a full hour, and it just takes up so much of your time, and days can disappear in binge watching. And I'm trying to limit my binge watching of things for 2 reasons. Number 1, I get legitimately depressed when I finish a TV show.
Yep.
And then I think I've got to wait 2 years for another season of this, or the show is done and now I don't have it anymore. Or I get to the end of a television show and I think, what am I going to do? Okay, I'll just watch it again. I've been through The Office maybe 7 times.
That's it?
Yeah, but I mean, start to finish, I've watched it. In fact,
Yeah.
I'm watching it right now. And I just watched the episode where Michael has money troubles and he declares bankruptcy by walking out and saying, "I declare bankruptcy."
I don't think that's how that works, Michael.
So this is a good segue into this. So you now you're the leader of these stations in Fargo, Moorhead.
Yep.
And radio has changed significantly since the first day you got into it, I assume.
Yes.
Now we are talking about, it's not just the broadcast aspect. It's the podcast. It's the blog. It's what do we call the product that you can the direct advertising in apps and stuff like that?
It's called programmatic.
Programmatic. Wow. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Programmatic.
Yeah. It's lifestyle targeting.
Lifestyle targeting. So tell people what that is if they've never heard about it.
So essentially what it is that there are networks of, websites, millions of them that are trying to get a little piece of the pie. And so they allow for these network banner ads, display ads, to show up on your site. And then what they do is they utilize the cookies that are, that you leave kind of across the web that most people now are trying to understand exactly why that happens. That are a consumer, what they're actually leaving. And it takes those cookies and it says, okay, so, doesn't know I'm Dan Cash. It doesn't know necessarily that, but it knows that I have an interest in this particular TV show, or I really like to go to this type of restaurant. And so then it starts being able to target those ads based on keywords that are selected as well as a geographic area to make it so the advertising is tailored directly to the types of interests that you have as an individual.
So in my mind, what is interesting about this is it's getting down to a local level. So
Yes.
It's not that you're only seeing national companies. You probably are seeing national companies, but now also you're seeing the butcher shop on the other side of town. You're starting to see, the mechanic who, is operating down the street from you rather than just a Meineke ad.
You are. And there's good and there's bad to it because as with anything in life, if it seems too good to be true, it sometimes can be. And what happens is that people forget that this is sort of the bottom of what we would call the marketing funnel. So this becomes, and you remember when I lost you guys on Game of Thrones or you lost me?
Yep.
We might get there on this. But just to make it as simple as possible, people have somewhat forgotten that there is this awareness part of advertising and marketing, which is that generally there's about 2% of people that are on for your product at any given time, which is why you have to be reaching them at a massive level. But then this lifestyle targeting is now that someone has maybe, let's see, seen it on TV or heard it on the radio or read it somewhere, they've now come down to this point where they're ready to make a purchase. Now they see this ad that's targeted to them because they've maybe researched it before. Now they click on the ad and they could potentially make a purchase or come into your business. But it's interesting because when something is so targeted, people are like, well, that's what I want, right? Because for years, people have been talking about 50% of your advertising is wasted, 50% of it is working. I just don't know which. That's always been the line. And the truth of the matter is people are always looking to siphon it down. But sometimes when you siphon it down, it becomes too targeted. So it's a really interesting time frame to look at that type of product.
Has it been difficult to take like a business who's been around for 70 years, right? So our father handed it down to his son, who handed it down to his son, or I guess mother into daughter. I don't know. That was probably sexist there. Next, it's a generational business.
Sure.
There you go. That's not sexist. So you're dealing with a generational business who says, well, the previous owner always bought an ad in the yellow pages, and then we do a little bit of radio and a little bit of TV and then buy a billboard. And so that's what we've always done, and we've been around for 70 years. We've lost 70% of our market share in the last 5 years. Is it hard to explain to them that, listen, you need to start thinking differently where you're placing your ad dollars because the world is changing, the users are changing, and you can actually get a more defined person if you go with some of these targeted pieces?
I think I deal with that less and less, but it has been something that you deal with, especially in that exact scenario, because let's face it, that happens all the time, that you have these advertisers that have been doing something very similar for a long period of time. It's worked, and that's great. I start every conversation I have with when somebody says that's where they're advertising, I say, number one, that's awesome. Congratulations, because you believe in advertising and you know that it works and you are doing something. And that's the number one first thing you got to do. You have to understand that there are people out there who, while you may think they should have heard about you, they probably haven't. And so to be involved in it at all is a very good thing because it doesn't always happen. The second step is to say, we need to talk about your customers. Are they coming in and are they making purchases? And if they're not, if it's a scenario like that where they've lost 70% of their business, let's talk about how this particular product will help to increase the ching at that cash register. Because that's really what we're looking for, right? At the end of the day is a business making sales and doing the right things with their product. And sometimes people get caught up in the minutia of all the other things that surround advertising and forget about the fact that it's being done for one reason only, to increase customers at that particular business. And to me, that's the most important thing, is to focus on, is this the right product for you? That depends entirely on, is it going to bring more business to you?
Do people confuse things like social media and say, well, yeah, I'm already on Facebook, so my nephew updates our page, once a month.
All the time.
And our store hours are there. So why do I need to buy something, a boosted post? Why do I need to do this? And is it because they don't understand it, or because it's just a new tool and there's a learning curve?
So I think that a lot of people don't understand it. I think that there is a majority of people in the United States that are even in advertising that are sort of confused on where it's going and what it's supposed to be. And obviously in the last few months, that's really changed for Facebook. But a lot of it happens to be, I think that Facebook was one of the greatest things that ever happened, that small business had an opportunity to connect with their people. But as they've changed the algorithms and made it, where you have Mark Zuckerberg actually coming out and saying things like, hey, we're going to make it tougher and tougher for businesses to be seen. They're going to have to work harder. That to me is sort of a weird thing to say when you're out there trying to help the small business. The biggest confusion I see, and by the way, I mean, if Mark Zuckerberg hears this, I'm in really big trouble. That was a bad thing to say about him, but I'm pretty sure he said very close to that. I'm paraphrasing. But one thing
he's
always
busy trying to find that 11 billion they just
that
lost.
Is true. No, he's up to 19 billion
19
now.
now?
Himself, yeah. So he, I read about that though on a Facebook meme. I don't know if it's true. So the thing that's interesting to me is that the biggest misconception is people not understanding the difference between marketing and advertising, and the fact that advertising is a subset of your overall marketing, which could literally be, having your logo on a napkin. I mean, that's part of marketing. And social media to me is that way. You are engaging with and talking to your current customers, your current, what we would call sphere of influence, which is an awesome thing. I mean, it really is. But if you're bringing in the masses and wanting to bring those people to your business that aren't like, I love this business so much, I have to like it on Facebook so I can consume it every second, you're not reaching new people. And that ends up being a big issue.
So in my previous job, I had the opportunity to meet and spend some time with Jason Calacanis, who's he was the first investor in Uber, I believe, the first investor in Tesla. Has Tesla #1, has his own podcast about investing and stuff like that. And I also had the chance to meet Chamath Palihapitiya, who was one of the first guys in Facebook. He's the guy who basically made AOL Instant Messenger what it became. So he was the guy running that when we were all using it. Went to Facebook and then left, and he was talking about in a talk that he gave about how he wasn't investing in Facebook at all. He was investing in Amazon because he was basically saying, listen, Facebook has reached its growth potential because their business model requires finding new people to use Facebook, and there's only a certain amount of them who do use Facebook, and there's only so many people alive, right? And most of them are probably on Facebook now. So the direction to grow with their old business model just doesn't make sense anymore. Whereas you think Amazon, there are always things to sell. There are always places to sell. And people were comparing the valuations of the two companies. There was like a big debate over who is more valuable. And he was saying, get out of Facebook, stay in something like Amazon that's providing a service to the customer versus using the customer as a product when they can't grow anymore.
Well, and it makes you wonder if that's why a Facebook is trying to create like Facebook Watch, where they're trying to actually have content that's created for it. But the one thing, some of the decisions they've made on the types of programming, and for me, the interface that you use, it's not like Amazon Prime. It's not like Netflix, of course. So I think what you're saying is 100% spot on, because they have not made that full-fledged leap. They've said, this is what we do, 100%. Maybe there's some variations to it. Oh, we're going to try to bring this into play. And to me, it's kind of like when Google was all about Google Plus.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we got to do this. But that's not the core of what they do.
Yeah, like if you had a business where your business was making spoons, you could always tailor the amount of spoons you make to the demand that comes in. But when what your product is data from the people who use your site, and your customers are demanding more, so the people who buy the data for their companies to advertise to, and you can't make them more spoons. You're like, no, I mean, we've got all the spoons we can, so now we got to figure out a different way to handle it. Plus, the being the first thing in the space that really took off, I think primes them to be the one that, they're the first over the line, so they're the first ones that are going to make every mistake. Right. And I wonder what the future is going to look like if, say, if people keep leaving Facebook because it's not popular amongst teenagers, it's popular amongst people who are my parents' age, right? Like that's actually the core group that uses Facebook now. I don't know what the future is going to be there for them.
Well, have you seen some of these? There's a documentary that talks about the reasons that Facebook is what it is and how people that they hired from a psychological standpoint created it to basically be like a casino.
Yep.
Where, when you like things and you see these likes, you're sort of like, it releases the, what is it exactly?
Endorphins?
Yeah, it's basically, it's not endorphins.
Dopamine or serotonin.
Dopamine. Yeah, it's dopamine. And you go, oh, this is great. I watched this documentary about a year ago, and now I find myself going, that's exactly what's happening here. That's why I want to go on Facebook. And it's not that it's a bad product. Like there's a lot of really, really cool things. But to me, you're always running the risk of being the next Yahoo.
Yeah. Next time you open your Instagram account, notice how long it takes for the pop-up to show you how many new comments you have and that, right? That's designed in to wait a second or two, right? You could just open it and it be up as soon as the page loads, but they have it coded so that once you open it again and refresh your info, it takes a second for you to look at the screen so that you can see the notification pop up, because that is the sweet spot. Mm-hmm. People want to go, how many new comments do I have? How many new followers do I have? And if you delay it for a second so they see it pop up, that's going to hook them into the software even more.
My fiance does not listen to this podcast, so I'm A-okay with this, but the most exciting part of getting engaged was having a Facebook post that had over 700 likes. all night
Wow.
long, rather than looking at pictures of us or like, giving her a little kiss. I was like, oh shit, look at that. Oh yeah, damn. Oh, we're going to breach 250 in like 5 minutes. This is amazing. And so you do.
Can I get a little kiss?
No. Hold on.
We're trending.
Oh yeah, actually, let's take a kiss and add to the comment section,
Right,
and maybe
that'll
we
help.
can increase. But there are moments like that, and I think people feel validated by social media now. So if you post the obituary for your grandfather, it is, let's face it, in a way, not to let people know that you're grieving right now or your grandfather passed, but you want the attention from it. That's why I think people go out and troll other people, is because they like the attention. It's just the same way a bully acts like that. They want the attention, so that's why they're engaging in this. That's why they're going out there and sometimes just trying to pick a fight online, which, can we all admit to, online fights are the worst fights ever.
Terrible.
They're the dumbest thing.
I can't really point the blame at anyone else because I've definitely been in plenty of them. And
Me too.
it took me a while to realize that arguing on social media is not an argument. Or here's what I realized. All the time on the news, you'll hear people refer to the conversation that's happening on social media, right? There's no such thing in my mind as the conversation that's happening in social media. That's not a conversation. A conversation are people sitting across from each other, having a back and forth in real time, and communicating in not just our words, but the tone of our voice and everything else. Online, that's just trench warfare. That's, I'm going to hide behind this thing, and when you're not looking, I'm going to lob it over the top, and then everyone who's in my trench is going to applaud for me when I do it, and you're going to try to lob something back, and we're just going to do this over and over again. That's what's going on in that space.
Side note, do you think the person who invented the T-shirt gun was involved in trench warfare?
Probably.
There's a bird trying to... Oh, you guys missed it. There's a bird trying to get into our studio there.
I thought I pulled those shut.
If you want to feel real bad,
I do.
go and watch every time any politician posts. Like, let's just say they're writing something just totally random, right? Like a very nice, it could be as simple as just saluting a particular picnic they were just at, right? Oh, it was great to be at this local town, and this is what I did. And I don't know why, but I've become obsessed recently with just like, I don't care about the post, like I'll read it, but then I go and look at the comments, and there's just such hate in everyone, and it's never in the middle. No one's like, wow, that picnic looks great. It's, well, why'd you vote on this? Why'd you do that? And I'm thinking to myself the whole time, I can't be the only one that's sitting here going, why must we attack this way? And it all goes back, and interestingly, now we'll bring it back to my dad. So my dad, who we sort of alluded to this, but he was a comedian, and now he's been a real estate agent for, for 38 years, although every time you talk to him, it's a year more of experience in his head. And
A lot of real estate agents start their career in comedy.
Really? Yeah. Well,
Big time.
So he was a writer, and he wrote jokes for Tim Allen for a while, and he did comedy stand up for a long time, and actually went to California and then came back to Michigan. And I mean, he was there for 3 years, and I have a famous Mitzi Shore story, but we can get to that later. So but it's funny because he is a brilliant comedian, especially in terms of how he writes, and he really wants to be famous. Not necessarily like him. He wants his work to be famous. And so he took to writing these little bits on Facebook and wanting it to be a thing where he'd get all these likes. And actually, it started with me having to edit YouTube videos of him doing funny little bits about like Kim Kardashian and these different things he was seeing in the world that he just thought were nuts. And one of them, this is the biggest mistake I ever made. I edited the whole thing. It was very funny, but I knew that I could get a lot of traffic if I put it on Reddit funny. And so he gets 12,000 views in the first 2 hours. And people are commenting, they're like, this is great, this is funny. And that was in like 2009 or 2010. Since that time, of course, we've never been able to replicate that success. And he holds everything against that 12,000 view standard. And it drives me crazy because I don't know how to tell him that probably 1,000 of those views are him refreshing it over and over on YouTube. But he had then taken it to a place where he was so involved in that, like the likes and the comments, that he then went to writing things on Facebook. Well, then he started getting into his political beliefs. And there's, of course, people that are like attacking him for it. And now he's gotten to a point where he'll say, he's like, I got about 100 likes. It was awesome. But there's a lot of people angry at me and I'm losing a little bit of business. And I go, of course you are. He's like, yeah, but they're not saying anything about the politics. I go, that's why they're doing it. You're there to help them for their house. They don't care about your political beliefs. Yes, but they need to know. No, they don't need to know.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how people don't understand that there's a time and a place for everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And social media is not the place. It's great if you endorse a candidate and you want people to know about that. But let me tell you something. It's going to do a lot more if you throw a neighborhood barbecue and just tell your friends and family while you're grilling up a burger, like, you should really give so-and-so a try, than posting it online, because all you do is you invite that debate. And it's not even debate's the wrong word, because there is no debate anymore. The mudslinging that has become online politics.
Oh, yeah.
If I was a politician, I would figure out a way to say, okay, listen, let's start a fake account for me. Let's call it like Jimmy, James, John, Josephine's. And I will tell that to my personal friends and family, but that'll be my personal secret Instagram account where I can actually talk to some of them. Or maybe you have to go to one of the rallies and they give it out like on a little card at the rally. It's like a secret deal. It's like secret agent style.
Yeah, a politician needs like one for their campaign, one for their family, and one for like dick pics.
Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some people forgot about the separation of them.
Did either of you ever watch the documentary Wiener?
I
the
need
Anthony
to because
Weiner?
the trailer is so effing good.
So-
Why did I say effing? But I'm going to say effing this time.
So what's amazing
Farting
about
good.
this, it's after his scandal. It's
Sure.
when he's running for mayor of New York. And it's a perfect documentary because it is a fly in the wall documentary where you watch things just dismantle themselves. They happen to be rolling the camera at the perfect, most opportune moments. And if you've ever seen a documentary where you kind of feel like, oh, they've massaged this a little bit, like this is set up, you kind of feel like there's a point during this documentary where they're high-fiving behind the camera because they're like, I told you Tuesday, I knew it. This is the day. This is the day he's going to get a call about this. And it is, you feel so bad for Anthony Weiner in there, but you think like, dude, you were asking, if your last name is Weiner to start with and you're getting into politics, you've got to keep it squeaky clean.
What's funny
Yes.
though is that he was really successel in politics for a while. Like,
Oh, yeah.
he'd held office for a while, and so like so many politicians, his wounds were self-inflicted. Because I mean, come on, dude, really?
He
You've got to
obviously-
be kidding me.
And it was continuous.
It was continuous. And I mean, he obviously has a compulsion and some sort of like illness. But I remember the trailer because even in the trailer, he's going like, why am I sitting for this documentary? Should I really be doing this
Yeah.
right now?
Because I can't believe
But
that
he
this is
can't.
happening.
He needs the attention. He needs the validation, like so many politicians do. So he just was willing to, in front of the camera, over and over again.
In the trailer, they used one of my favorite pieces of music, which is "In the Hall of the Mountain King." It's like, and because it gets to that build, and in the trailer, and while shit's going to like hell in a handbasket all around him, you could watch the trailer and find enjoyment just in watching the trailer. But when you watch the full length documentary, by the way, when Wiener came out, there was another documentary movie about wiener dogs that came out almost at the exact same time called Wiener Dog. But movie theaters were constantly having to explain which one was showing because their marquee could only have so many letters on it. And so, someone would think that they're going to go see a documentary about wiener dogs, but they'd turn out, they're like, when do the wiener dogs come on? Why am I looking at Anthony Weiner?
That's like, what was the Office joke when Pam goes to see 28 Days?
Yeah.
And not 28 days later. It's like, I kept waiting for Sandra Bullock to show up, and she never did.
You're a pretty young guy too. You're a pretty young guy to be like the head of this operation. So you must have really worked hard. Did you have years of your life where you're like, I am just living
Yes.
in the office?
100%. I became like, I loved it. I loved every second of it. I had this, I find this funny because it's sort of like, and this is so dumb that I would even compare this, but you hear these stories of like Mark Zuckerberg, right? Or like, just like, I'm so engaged with this, like everything about it. This is my life. I'm changing the world. And you know what? like I had that feeling when we were building our digital department. I mean, I wasn't, right? It was, but I was changing people's lives in certain ways and helping businesses and helping people that were on the air. And to me, it was this really new, cool thing that I had the ability to help with, and also was like consuming the content at all times. Like I wanted the knowledge. I would read everything I could, and I would be at the office till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I don't know, it just seemed like the coolest thing ever. And this is what's really funny is when our company started coming out to the Dakotas, I think it was 2012 when we bought Sioux Falls. And I will never forget, and who in their right mind would ever think this, I thought it was the most amazing thing in the world that I was going to get to go to South Dakota, like to see Sioux Falls and see the falls. I remember this feeling, and I still get it when I go to Sioux Falls, that it was like, wow, this is like new frontier. Like I've never been here. For some reason, I had never been out here. And I always thought that was the coolest thing ever, to stay at the Candlewood Inn and be able to get up at 7 a.m. and just sit out on the big table desk they had and just work on my stuff and build out proposals and do some training with the Sioux Falls staff. And then when they were like, we need you to go up to Fargo to check out that and work with the sales staff there, I was like, oh, this is great. Yeah, let's do this. So now I'm in Fargo and I'm doing the same thing. And I don't know why I thought it was the coolest thing ever to just go and meet these people. And I was working ridiculous hours. I mean, people thought I was insane, especially my parents and my brothers.
And you still do. I mean, I've bumped into you more often than not on the weekends in the office.
Yes.
The only difference is you dress down a little bit more. And
yes.
You blare Guster really, really loud.
Really loud, like super loud. Actually, you know what I'm into now? And you were talking about shows. I am obsessed with watching like these crime shows, especially like Forensic Files, which if you're alone is a terrifying show. I mean, and they do this thing in the show, if you've ever seen it, where they must have added it in like season 3, because I'm just noticing it, where they do this whoosh when they're going into another scene. And if you're just sitting there writing or typing and you're just like, oh, I'm just kind of like listening, and it's like, what happened? Like, who's here? Because I'm sitting upstairs at the office all alone. There's no one up there, and I am just terrified. So that's kind of what I do. I'll sit there and I'll be watching Forensic Files, which I've decided I have to close my door, because if somebody were to walk in that I don't know and just see that, they would be so confused as to what was happening. It's like, I don't know.
First 48 for me.
Oh, that's good
That's
too.
my jam. First 48.
I'll watch anything I can that is that.
One of the biggest things that ever happened in Fargo is, with the Gina North kidnapping was a huge deal. When I was a kid, that captivated not only our community but the nation, because it got enough attention that America's Most Wanted filmed an episode up here detailing the Gina North abduction. And I remember the reality of that setting into a lot of adults being like, okay, if John Walsh is coming here for this, like this is not just something that we were dealing with in our community, but the nation was at that point. And I remember it was a ghost town the night that aired. Everyone was at home, and this is before the days of DVR, so you sat and you watched it, and it was very intense, and it was very emotional for like this area to watch that.
I remember that whole thing is seared into my brain, because I went to her elementary school and saw her in the hallways. And I remember the moment being at the YMCA for swimming lessons and leaving, and there was a poster up with her face on it. And I just remember going, Mom, I know that girl, or I've seen that girl. I didn't know her personally. And so, yeah, she was 1 or 2 grades above me at Horseman. And that was just so weird, and
it was very scary.
And I remember when we planted a tree in the back of Horseman in memory of her and stuff like that. That rocked this community.
Mm-hmm. And even today, people still talk about it. It's close to the Jacob Wetterling abduction for us. And of course, Jacob Wetterling was not far away. I know people who knew the Wetterling family, and so I always think that when I watch something like that, one of the first things I try and think about is, okay, who are the real people that this is affecting, and having to go through an ordeal like that. Have you ever heard of, I think his name is Larry Low-Tax Looper?
No.
So there's a small political race that takes place, I think in Tennessee it was, and two opponents. One was the incumbent that everyone loved, and there's this other guy, Larry Looper, who wanted this spot. So much so that he legally changed his middle name to Low Tax, so that on the ballot it was Larry Low Tax Looper. So days before the election, his opponent goes missing and is found dead.
The incumbent.
The incumbent, yeah. And it is obvious right off the bat that Larry is the guy. Like, the cops put it together like 24 hours. Like, nope, he's our man. And the problem at that time was they'd already printed the ballots. They're legally they had to have this thing go, but they had to strike out the deceased name. So Larry Low Tax Looper is the only person running for this. There's no law against him holding this seat, even if he is currently arrested awaiting trial for murder. So he thinks he's going to get elected. In one of the largest write-ins in U.S. history, the deceased's wife is elected into the spot instead. It's a very so I saw that in a Cold Case Files.
That's
episode.
incredible.
It is intense.
I know what I'm gonna Google for when I get home today.
Right.
Yeah, you're gonna really like it. I wonder if has America's Most Wanted put all those episodes online yet?
I have no
Can you
idea.
watch
I don't
those?
think
not
they
sure.
have. I haven't seen. He has another show on Netflix that is similar in nature, but I don't know if they're still doing it. It was something like that. Have you seen, by the way, like, I'm a big Dateline fan. I mean, I'm 34, and my friends that are a little younger than me are like, really? So are you 100? Like, that's what you're doing? You go home on Saturday nights and watch Dateline? Yeah, I do. I mean, my wife and I love it. And I love it for the stories, like they brilliantly tell stories, but I also love it for the characters, like for Keith Morrison and the way he talks, and like Josh Mankiewicz. And have you seen, I don't know if we talked about this, but have you seen that video of Bill Hader impersonating all of them?
Mm-hmm.
That's like one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And it's funny to me because my dad, when I was growing up, he would always watch City Confidential, which was a similar type show. And he had this thing where the guy that was the voice of the show would basically, he'd always have some saying where he'd say, like, it was Farmington Hills, Michigan, a stone's throw from Novi, where you saw them walk into the picture. This was a town where everyone knew everyone. And I always thought, like, what a brilliant thing. Like, can you imagine them sitting in a room going, all right, we got the stone's throw, we use that. How do we incorporate these two towns and make it really creepy as well?
What was it? Was City Confidential the one that Paul Winfield narrated? Maybe.
It could be.
Maybe. And then did he die like before the show ended, and so they had to replace him, and then no one liked the new guy as much?
Yeah, that could be.
Does that sound about right?
There's a lot of those, but yeah.
Yeah, mid-90s for me, it would have been Rescue 911,
Yeah.
Cops, and then America's Most Wanted.
How about Unsolved Mysteries?
And Unsolved Mysteries,
And which is on Amazon Prime now.
Yeah.
Those four
What
shows.
a week that was for me.
Yeah.
Unsolved Mysteries scares the crap out of me. Do you guys ever see the movie Fire in the Sky? The alien abduction movie, Fire in the
Yeah.
Sky? That movie kept me in the house for maybe 2 years. I would not go outside. I was so freaked out. And then Unsolved Mysteries did the same thing for me too. And the music from Unsolved Mysteries still gives me goosebumps. Like, still gives me a little willy.
When I first started watching it again, I got that. But you know what still scares me to this day, like terrifies me more than anything else, is what was the Nickelodeon one? Don't Be Afraid of the Dark.
Mm-hmm. Are you
Afraid
afraid
of the
of
Dark? That to this day, which is ridiculous. Like if you go back and watch it, it's not scary at all. But that swing that's just swinging empty, I can see that in my nightmares to this day. Like, why were we even allowed to watch that show?
Most of the kids in that show were Canadian.
Really?
And so they would fly these Canadian kids into the United States because they legally were allowed to pay them less because they were Canadian. And so a lot of the kids on Nickelodeon were Canadian. So you can't do that on television, a huge Canadian cast. There's a lot.
But Roundhouse?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably, I'd imagine.
All that?
Not all that. By that point, Nick had opened up their LA studios, and
Wild
so
and
they were
Crazy
able to
Kids?
do much more. No, because they were just using real kids, and then he just had the three hosts.
Where was Nickelodeon made
So
originally?
Nickelodeon owned studios in Orlando.
Legends of the Hidden Temple?
That was filmed in front of a live studio audience in Orlando. I have a book called Slimed, which is about the golden years of Nickelodeon, and it's an oral history, so told by the kids who were on it and the producers. And
No
like,
Mark Summers.
no, yeah, he's way
talks about
interviewed
it?
into it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And he talks about how the Double Dare set stunk so bad because the recipe for that green slime changed all the time based on whatever was cheapest. So sometimes it would be oatmeal, food dye, and this product, and sometimes it would be jelly based. And he said, you know, you've got drums, giant drums of this that they're pouring all over the place. And he said it's under those hot studio lights, and so it would just stink. So at times you'd look at the studio audience, and they'd be waving hands in front of their face, going like, "Oh God, this is so bad." And then some of those kids would get caked in this stuff and have to stay in it for hours because they'd have a technical glitch in between game 1 and game 2. And so you're covered in snot from a giant nose you were trying to pull a flag out of.
Oh,
And you
He's
just have to
also
sit
like
there
a
and wait.
germaphobe too.
He is. He's got obsessive compulsive
That's
disorder.
what it is. Yeah.
what was that stuff called? GAC.
GAC.
GAC. Nickelodeon
They still sell
GAC.
that?
They just started selling GAC again.
And then followed by Floam.
Yep.
Didn't they just bring Double Dare back?
They did. Yeah. It's their new episodes on Hulu right now.
Okay.
These
And
people are brilliant. Seriously,
they are.
It's cyclical, all of it.
I have been saying for years that we are now at a point where if a bar built a Double Dare like obstacle course, I would pay $100 to get in just for the opportunity to maybe get picked out of the crowd to do one of those, to run in the giant hamster wheel.
Did you I wanted the Craig from Guts, the trophy.
Yeah.
that
That
was
was
like
cool,
the
yeah.
giant mountain that they would climb.
Or do you remember What Would You Do? Another Mark Summers show. Like, they had. See, that's the thing. If I'm going to own a bar, I want to own a Nickelodeon themed bar, and I bet it'd
Why
be
they
like the
don't do
next
that?
Dave and Buster's.
Copyright problems. You know what's funny though is like, were those shows actually brilliant, or was it just because it was during the time we were growing up?
It was because it was content aimed at your age group,
Right.
And it really hadn't been done before.
Yeah.
There were cartoons, but there's an age between cartoons and unsolved mysteries where you needed to fill something in, and you were also seeing kids your own age competing in these things. You were seeing things like, do you remember Nick Arcade, the game show that took
Yeah,
place
oh, yeah.
inside of a video game? There were all these things that just, you know, they're creating content that nobody else was, feeding directly into children. And so, no, if you go back and watch some of this, it has not aged as well as you would like.
We almost never had cable growing up. Like for one summer, we had cable at my dad's house, and that was it. So anytime I could go to a friend's house with cable, watching Nickelodeon was like hot, buttery heroin coming in.
Yeah.
Like it was like, oh, can we watch? We're running Stippy's on tonight. Yes. Yes. Oh, my goodness. I can't wait to watch this.
And
It
then
was.
so much, you know, Nick's parent company is Viacom, who also owned MTV at the time. And so they had a perfect way of transitioning you from Nickelodeon into MTV by
Sure.
having like their animation block and stuff like that.
The summer that we had cable was also when Nick at Night was getting big, so it was a lot of TV Land stuff, and they were doing marathons of Bewitched and then I Dream of Jeannie, and then they had a big call-in vote to vote on who would win in a battle between Samantha and Jeannie, and I got really into that because I was Team Samantha hardcore, and I followed it all week long. I was like, because they would update the results on TV, and oh man, I was big into that. So I really got into TV Land stuff too, Dragnet, and I forget what else was playing. The Dick Van Dyke Show was on from
That was
time
a
to
big one.
time.
We're all similar aged. I felt really bad the day I turned on Nick at Night and they were playing reruns of classic episodes of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Oh no.
And I thought, well, that's how you know you're an adult, is when you've transitioned into Nick at Night based television shows.
That would be a good show to bring back, by the way.
Fresh Prince?
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, I don't think Will would do it at this point. He's beyond it.
I don't know. Is he like, I can't think of the last movie he had that was a super hit.
Yeah, that's kind of true, isn't
Right?
it? But he's probably fine monetarily.
True. Maybe they can get him for a single season.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe it could be his son. I mean, his son could be the guy
There
that
you
does
go.
it. That could work out.
I liked his version of the Karate Kid. I know people are going to get pissed about that, but it's not like it was a continuation. It was just a different karate story.
You know, since we're going on non sequiturs here, that
Mm-hmm.
was this Karate Kid show that is out on YouTube.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Cobra Kai.
Yeah, so I like badly want to see this show, and I see previews for it, and I'm like, that would be like a good show. But I find it really interesting because I cannot bring myself to figure out how to get on the YouTube product. I know it's not hard. You have to go in and register just like anything else. But I'm like, man, I'm already on Netflix. I'm on Amazon Prime. Like, I've got this. I got this. Do I need another one just for this one show? Are there other shows that would be worthwhile on the YouTube network?
You want to hear something amazing? So YouTube, owned by Google now, they allow you to sign in with your Google account.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to start, like, if you have a Google account,
Now,
you've got a YouTube account.
I hate to be the one to tell you this.
You also don't need to
but
sign in to watch anything, right?
you do in this because you can watch the first episode of Cobra Kai for free, but then you have to have YouTube Red, which is their subscription service like Netflix that they're creating content for to watch the other episodes.
But as a part of YouTube Red, do you get to watch the YouTube Live product, or is that additional?
You do. Yeah.
Okay,
at
that
least,
might be
at
worth
least what
it.
I did. So I signed up for that free month, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to binge watch Cobra Kai because I don't know if I'm going to hold on to this.
When you say
forever.
the YouTube Live product, do you mean that there's more live content that's behind the paywall as well? Because there's plenty of free live content on YouTube all the time.
I was just talking like their cable network one.
Gotcha.
They're
Okay.
basically trying to do product, or they're basically doing cable, right?
Yep.
So, slight non sequitur, but on YouTube and live streaming, I used to run the YouTube channel at my old job, so I'm really steeped in how YouTube works and the culture of it, and I'm on it every day. And there's this relatively new thing where people will create live stream channels where for a while they were doing Rick and Morty episodes, and like they weren't getting shut down. So at any time of day there was like a live stream of just Rick and Morty episodes playing. And now there are all these accounts that are popping up that are in foreign languages that only have like 100 followers or whatever, and they'll do 24/7 live stream kung fu action new Western movies, and then you click on it, and it was someone had basically taken a bunch of Stormy Daniels porno and edited out all the sex. So there was no nudity. There was only each like scene as it began and then once it was over. And so I'm like watching like this totally edited Western starring Stormy Daniels going, when is the sex going to happen? I wanted to see if YouTube was going to let like streaming porn go by for like a day before they shut it down. But no.
How many minutes do you think you watched?
I bet I put in a solid 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good time. I mean, like, I don't think I'd watch a regular show that long if it wasn't any good.
Part of it was I want to see where this goes.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And I never watched anything with Stormy Daniels in it before, literally, except for like her news appearance or her 60 Minutes appearance. So
I've done two little social experiments using Facebook Live where I cooked a steak, but I took a big stool and I put like my phone up on it so that you could just see the steak cooking the whole time. At one point, I had 180 people watching and like commenting on it. So later on that weekend, I made whipped cream and I live streamed and it's not instructional. It is no
You're just
dialogue,
doing it.
just
Basically
watching
slow
the thing
TV.
go woo, 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 woo. Yeah, pretty much. And for weeks, people were like, I watched that whipped cream thing. Was I missing something? Like I didn't see what's the recipe? Or I watched your whipped cream thing. And which is weird because Jill looked at me going, what whipped cream thing? Like, what did you put on the internet? But it is amazing because I find myself falling into those same, if I see one of those giant, the pneumatic, crushers, I will get lost on that YouTube channel for hours. Be like, I wonder what it does do to Legos.
It was this weekend where there was the lunar eclipse?
Yep.
Okay, and you could not see it in like North America or South America. Those are the only two places. And I happened to see this weather guy I follow that is in like Alabama. I don't even know why I follow him. Had posted, well, we can't see the lunar eclipse, but NASA has a live view of it. And I was like, okay, so I click on it. And it is literally just the moon looking red. No movement, nothing. It's a video, but nothing. And I'm like, okay. And I'm just watching it. And I probably spent a good 5 to 10 minutes watching it until I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Like, there's nothing to this.
I
It's like that giraffe when people are waiting for the giraffe to have the baby.
Yeah, I like the feed that comes from the International Space Station because there's a live feed going on there constantly, with the exception of there are moments where I believe they're on one side of the Earth and their relay satellites on the other one, so the screen goes blue. But yeah, basically there's a constant HD live feed looking at the Earth from the International Space Station. And sometimes if I'm like working on something and I just want something happening over here on this screen, I'll just put that up. Sometimes there's a spacewalk going on. Sometimes they're just flying over the Earth and you're looking at cities and stuff. That's pretty awesome.
We've really just created a live real-time screensaver in these things.
Yeah.
Because It'll just be on in the background. Like in the Truman Show when Ed Harris is talking about, like, some people just like to have it on while they sleep. That's all we're doing.
By the way, when you talk about like why they have these things, and you see, okay, it's a screensaver, right? Do you ever look at it and think to yourself, like, what am I doing with my life that I have to look at a live stream? We don't even know if it really is a live stream. I mean, would you? How would you ever know if it's not? They have a video of a moon just sitting there.
Here's how they were able to tell that we'd want to watch this stuff, like a screensaver. Because you remember the old screensaver with the little worm thing that bounces around the screen, and you'd always wait for it to go directly into the corner so it would go straight back out.
Just like in that Office episode.
We would just watch that all the time as kids. Like, we'd be in the library waiting for a presentation to start and just watch the thing, and it's going for the corner. It's going for the corner.
Oh.
Yeah, Pam says she thinks she saw it hit the corner of the screen when she was alone. Yeah, I believe she thinks she saw it.
I saw it. Jim didn't say I saw it? I saw it. It was amazing. So this is a good non sequitur to thanks for coming into the podcast, Dan. We kept you longer than I intended, so I hope you don't have big plans for today.
I literally have nothing. Thank you so much. This was a dream come true for me.
If people want to find you, how can they find you?
So if they want to find me, I'm on Twitter at Daniel Cash. They could also email me, dan.cash@mwcradio.com. I think that's probably it. Or advertisefargomoorhead.com/cash.
Ooh, there you go. This is the Cash Man, as those ads proclaim
my
you to be.
creative department felt the need to create a character that I sort of fully jumped on board with called Cash Man.
I told Scott she needs to draw Cash Man.
Oh, I've already talked to him about it. I forked over the cash.
Well, not yet, nemesis, Dr. Debt.
What a brilliant thing.
Tell your creative department they're welcome to use that as much as they want.
You know what we've talked about? It started out as like we'll do it one time, and it's just like a 30-second commercial we air that just talks about how I'm like constantly thinking about marketing ideas and how I can help your business, and it's totally true. But it's an interesting thing because we talk about, people don't create serial characters anymore on radio or TV, but especially like radio and advertising. Like back to like Where's the Beef? Like that was a character that continued to grow. They don't do that anymore. And that would be a really cool thing. And I'm very open to that person being me. So we're going to serial this thing.
Dr. Debt, I'm telling you.
Dr. Debt.
All right, Dan Cash, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, guys.
JJ Meets World.
Well, that does it for this episode. We'd like to thank you folks for paying $50 to listen to quality entertainment like this. Wait a minute, what? You listen to this for free? Well, isn't that great? You just got a great episode of quality content on your device for nothing. So how about turning around and helping us out with this? You can keep the lights on by going to our Patreon account, patreon.com/JJMeetsWorld. Throw us $1, $2, $3, $4, $5. Heck, if you give us a Ben Franklin on there, we're going to give you a shout out in the next episode. And while you're at it, why don't you go and subscribe to JJ Meets World? Places like iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you consume the podcast that you love, drop us a great rating. You can't give it a 0 in most of these places, so it might as well be a 5. Also, if it's a star rating, make note that this company should change their rating. You just listened to a whole podcast where we talked about it for like 20 minutes. While you're on the web, why don't you swing over to moonbasemaria.com? That is the website of my producer, Mr. Tucker Lucas. He takes care of every single episode. He wrangles the cords. He mics the mics. And you can definitely get into contact with him through that website. If you want to reach me, your host with the most, you're going to go to linebenders.com. I have my mailing address there, but please, please, please stop sending me mail directly to my home. The parole officer has to open all the mail before it gets there, and things are starting to get weird between us. When I was a little kid, I was afraid of gremlins. Like, I thought gremlins were real. And so I slept for many years with a light on. And now whenever I sleep with a light on, I wet the bed.